On February 28, 2025, a scheduled meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House took an unexpected turn, escalating into a heated confrontation that led to the abrupt termination of discussions and the cancellation of planned agreements. The meeting, which initially aimed to finalize a mineral rights deal and address the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia, quickly devolved into a tense exchange of accusations and conflicting demands. The proposed mineral rights agreement was intended to grant the United States access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals in exchange for continued military and economic support for Ukraine's defense efforts. However, tensions flared when President Trump accused President Zelensky of failing to show adequate gratitude for the support Ukraine had received from the U.S. Expressing his frustration, Trump asserted, "You should be more grateful because, let me tell you, you don't have any cards to play with us. You have cards, but without us, you have no cards." Vice President J.D. Vance joined the criticism, suggesting that Ukraine was not engaging sufficiently in diplomatic efforts to de-escalate the war with Russia. He remarked, "I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that will help stop the destruction of your country." In response, Zelensky countered that entering peace talks without solid security guarantees was not a viable option, citing past instances where agreements brokered with Russia had been violated. He expressed deep concerns over a ceasefire without a comprehensive peace framework, stating, "We need not just a ceasefire. I have already signed an agreement with Putin in the presence of Macron and Merkel. What kind of diplomacy are we talking about here?" Following the abrupt end of the meeting, European leaders quickly voiced their support for Ukraine. Kaja Kallas, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, implicitly criticized Trump's stance, stating, "The free world needs a new leader," and reaffirmed Europe's steadfast commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, commended Zelensky for his resilience and leadership, pledging that the EU would remain unwavering in its support against Russian aggression. French President Emmanuel Macron strongly condemned Russia's role as the aggressor and emphasized the necessity of maintaining sanctions to pressure Moscow. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni urged for an urgent summit involving the US, the EU, and Ukraine to realign their collective support and address rising tensions. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer reiterated the UK's firm commitment to backing Ukraine, vowing to stand by the country in its struggle against Russian forces. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also reaffirmed Canada's dedication to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, aligning with European leaders in their unified stance. The growing rift between the U.S. and its traditional allies was further exacerbated by economic policies introduced by the Trump administration. Earlier in February 2025, President Trump imposed a 25% tariff on all steel and aluminum imports into the U.S., significantly impacting major exporters such as Canada, Mexico, and the EU. This move triggered immediate backlash, with European Commission President von der Leyen expressing regret and warning of firm and proportionate countermeasures to protect European economic interests. Similarly, Prime Minister Trudeau strongly opposed the tariffs, calling them unacceptable, and emphasizing the potential damage they could inflict on the long-standing trade relationship between Canada and the U.S. These trade restrictions have heightened concerns about a possible global trade war, with both Canada and the EU exploring retaliatory measures. As part of their response, the EU and several countries, including Canada, have enforced digital services taxes targeting US-based tech giants such as Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. In retaliation, President Trump ordered investigations into these taxation policies, viewing them as discriminatory against American companies. He directed the U.S. Trade Representative's office to explore the possibility of imposing new tariffs on imports from the countries enforcing digital services taxes, further escalating economic tensions. The third anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine served as a critical moment for international diplomacy. While European and Canadian leaders participated in ceremonies in Kyiv to reaffirm their solidarity with Ukraine, shifts in U.S. policy under the Trump administration created unease among allies. With the U.S. adopting a less supportive stance and pushing for a swift resolution to the conflict, divergences in strategy have emerged between Washington and its European counterparts. Canadian Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly highlighted ongoing discussions among G7 nations regarding a joint statement on Ukraine, noting that disagreements with the U.S. had arisen over how strongly to condemn Russian aggression. This situation underscores the EU and Canada's shared commitment to a coordinated approach in supporting Ukraine, despite evolving U.S. policies. Beyond security matters, Canada and the EU have sought to strengthen their bilateral ties in response to increasing uncertainty in U.S. trade policy. Meetings between Canadian and European officials have focused on deepening commercial relations, enhancing security cooperation, and reinforcing shared economic frameworks. The Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, which has been provisionally enforced since 2017, remains central to these efforts, facilitating significant growth in trade and investment. Meanwhile, President Trump's rhetoric regarding Canada has taken a strikingly confrontational tone in recent months. After initially downplaying Canada's economic significance, Trump escalated matters by suggesting that Canada should be annexed as the 51st state of the U.S. in a series of posts on Truth Social. He claimed, "We spend hundreds of billions subsidizing Canada. Why? No reason at all. We don't need anything from them. We have endless energy, manufacture our own cars, and possess more lumber than we could ever use. Without this enormous subsidy, Canada wouldn't even function as a country." Harsh but true. So Canada should become our beloved 51st state, much lower taxes and vastly superior military protection for Canadians, and no tariffs. These provocative statements have not only drawn widespread global criticism but have also indicated Trump's willingness to exert economic pressure on a key ally. Despite claiming that the U.S. does not need Canada, Trump has simultaneously acknowledged the country's crucial role in supplying crude oil, natural gas, and other essential commodities. His messaging has fluctuated between dismissing Canada's importance and recognizing its value as a key supplier, revealing a broader agenda of using economic leverage to push for greater U.S. control over Canadian resources. Trump has also maintained an aggressive tariff policy toward Canada, enforcing a 25% tariff on most Canadian goods while imposing a reduced 10% tariff on energy imports, which he justifies as necessary to protect American jobs and national security. Defending these policies, he stated, "Without tariffs, we're essentially bankrolling Canada." His proposal for Canadian statehood has been met with fierce resistance. Prime Minister Trudeau dismissed the idea outright, saying, "That has a snowball's chance in hell," while Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre firmly stated, "Canada will never be the 51st state. We are an independent, sovereign nation." Across Canada, grassroots movements have emerged in response, with citizens proudly wearing "Canada is not for sale" merchandise in defiance of Trump's remarks. In a private conversation caught on a hot mic, Trudeau reportedly told business leaders, "I suspect that not only does the Trump administration understand our critical mineral reserves, but that may actually be why they keep pushing this 51st state idea. They know exactly what we have, and they want control over it. That's the real issue." His remarks reflect growing concerns over Canada's sovereignty and the long-term implications of U.S. economic coercion. As tensions continue to mount, the EU and Canada are reinforcing their cooperation to counterbalance U.S. policies. Canada's push for trade diversification, including agreements with Indonesia and Ecuador, and its strategic partnerships with the EU on critical minerals, highlight a broader effort to secure economic and geopolitical stability in the face of U.S. unpredictability. The situation remains fluid, with global leaders closely monitoring developments. Whether Trump's aggressive economic tactics will yield concessions or further isolate the U.S. from its allies remains to be seen. But the geopolitical landscape of 2025 is undoubtedly more volatile than in previous years.